And so I'll jump right in so that we have as much time as possible to get into this topic of the peace builder's journey, or if you would, the role of teacher identity and motivation in teacher practice within the context, of course, of peace education and peace pedagogy. One of the things that will come up as we go through the idea of teacher identity and motivation is that being a peace educator is a mixed experience in a lot of ways. It challenges us, it inspires us, it stretches us in ways that we may not have anticipated, especially when we remember how peace education and peace pedagogy is always situated in context, right? We're always trying to do something that is transformative through peace education and peace pedagogy, but it's in a social and a political and an institutional context. And that can both help us and can set up hurdles for us as well on the path. So if you permit me, I'll just introduce here, there's a lot of research in the field of education on teacher identity and teacher motivation. Here are just a few little highlights in case you want to look further, but if you look in, this is a little bit dated literature, but still very relevant. Teachers are constantly reinventing themselves throughout the course of their 20, 30, 40, however many years it is that they're working in their profession. And as teachers, we create narratives at different stages, at different points to explain to ourselves who we are and why are we teaching and what are we teaching and towards what end. And teachers also have been found to kind of have operational metaphors that they use to guide themselves in understanding their role. And sometimes these can be comical, sometimes these can be tragic, sometimes these can be heroic, but teachers often have some kind of metaphor for what it means to them to step into the classroom every single day. And as you were just saying there, Ado, I liked it very much, talking also from our own experience and inviting our students to talk about their experience. This is the storytelling part of teaching. And the more we can create stories that relate to our actual lived experience, the more we engage in doing that identity work. And that identity work is something which is in constant formation as we live. Teachers especially can feel some kind of pressure, internal and external pressure, between who they actually are, the actual self, who they ought to be as the, in the eyes of whatever measure it is that they're holding, and who their ideal self is in terms of their own vision of their best teacherhood and best personhood. And so there are these external and internal reflections on self that can be both helpful and challenging for teachers. And as I said already, the teacher's identity shifts over time. This might be because of our own emotions, our own experiences, or external things such as job changes or things happening in our society. And as we said right at the beginning, there's somehow an unavoidable interrelationship between our personal and professional identity. And this is really funny because a lot of what we're told is that as teachers, you're supposed to be a professional, you're supposed to be objective, you're supposed to teach your curriculum subject. The self is not in the classroom, and yet this is not real because the self is always there. The self is that experiment of humanity that happens in front of the eyes of our students and our future teachers. And so this is where I invite you to, instead of trying to step away from the self, to actually embrace the process of self and identity in your teaching work. And this is especially important in the context of a post-conflict society, in the context of peace education, because this is where human life takes place, human values, the sense of purpose, the sense of community and society. And so taking on as a reflection exercise or even as a professional development activity, autobiography is telling our own life story, and autoethnography is observing ourselves in our environment. So teachers can observe themselves in their own practice and journal about their own practice. When my student said this, I was feeling like that, and then step away from it and come back and reflect on that as a piece of ethnographic research and try to understand what's happening. Or for example, sharing life story and inviting life story in the classroom when, especially like the other day, Judy Pace was talking about controversial issues. So autoethnography and autobiography represents a shift away from this pressure to be objective all the time and to engage with and value our subjectivity. And it recognizes that both the self of the teacher and the self of the students are situated within these wider and connected histories, and structures and cultures that also have an influence on conflict and peace building, and that the self, the identity of the teacher, is a mediating factor between peace building theory and practice. Whoever takes a peace building theory and exactly implements it, copy paste. Nobody does that. We always select and we interpret. And the more we are aware of this selection and interpretation based on how comfortable we feel with conflict and how comfortable we feel with peace building, the more we know ourselves and the more we create space to know other people. And so there are some beautiful opportunities to explore these intersections between our life experiences, our teaching practice, and the role that we play in searching for and building peace, healing, reconciliation, justice, and social change in other domains. So we won't do all of these, but I share them with you so you can use them. Some people have done this workshop with me before and know this stuff already, and maybe have tried it out. There are many different ways to reflect on our identity as a teacher in general, and as a peace educator in particular. One is to simply put your name here, me, in the middle, and then to reflect on what are your characteristics and attributes? What are your personal qualities? What are your life experiences? What are your professional skills that make you as an educator? And there are two different lines here. The outgoing lines are the things that you feel about yourself. And then the incoming lines are the ones that you've heard people say about you. So somebody might say, oh, Layla, I really love how you're able to synthesize things and make people feel welcome and well hosted in a space, that you really have a gift for that. You just know how to make people feel welcome and warm inside. So you might add that there, warmth and welcoming, or being able to synthesize ideas. And then you can reflect on what are the three most significant to you and why. Another way to do this is to actually look more as a process over time. So it's a little bit the same thing, but this is more of a time reflection. So over time, I have had a constant commitment to peace. For me, this is a universal necessary value that has not changed since my childhood. But I, over time, have changed in terms of what I understand to be perhaps the priority in any given conflict context. I've come to see conflict context or post-conflict context as evolving. And with our little group, and Harris and I were remembering the good old days of Obrazovanie Zamir. Right after the war, the priority was psychological and social well-being. It wasn't timely to engage in controversial and critical issues right after the war. The first priority was healing and establishing foundations of trust to be able to meet across community lines. But now, of course, the situation has evolved and different things become priority, different things become sudden changes and ongoing processes. Another one for me, I've had a huge experience becoming a mother, and that changes how I've been behaving as an educator, because I understand the evolution of people a bit differently now that I have been a parent. So I will invite you to do this exercise. I'm calling it the Peace Builder's Journey, narrating your own journey of transformation and purpose. We don't always recognize that we're on a journey. And yet the metaphor of journey is interesting because it helps us to see things as a process across our life, not necessarily a linear one. It gives us an opportunity to take stock of where we have been, where we are, and where we're heading. We might notice along that journey that we've lost some things and gained some things, and that we might still be searching for something. And it gives us a chance to review and assess and orient ourselves. And in this story, you are the main character. You're the protagonist. You're the main driver of your own journey as a peace educator. And you might also find that peace building is a rewarding journey, but also one that's fraught with difficulties. And so it fits very well, this metaphor. Pursuing the path of peace building is fundamentally pursuing transformation, and that in itself is heroic. And I draw for this metaphor from a very famous device in the study of literature, which is known as the hero's journey. And the hero's journey was identified in the late 1940s as a kind of an archetypal structure to epic tales, with which Joseph Campbell delineated. He studied a host of epic tales from ancient Greek and Roman periods to other literatures, and he found that all of the epic tales had certain common characteristics and certain stages. And the first one being the departure, where an unlikely, usually not heroic person kind of either is called upon or stumbles upon or sets out to do something that they don't actually feel ready to do. They get called upon to start a journey. And Here it might be a process of reflection. It might be an invitation. At a certain point, the individual decides that they will or will not set out on this journey. They might turn back, or they might say, what the heck, I'm going to give it a go. And they cross the threshold and they're initiated into this journey, and they begin the process, and it's inevitably fraught with various sorts of unexpected trials and difficulties, but it's also characterized by that person gaining tools and powers that they didn't have before, sometimes receiving gifts or mentorship, and ultimately being put to the test to see whether or not they have fulfilled the mission that they were entrusted with. And along the way, they gain wisdom. And the third stage is when they return to the normal world where they started, but somehow different. They come with a different set of eyes, a different set of tools, and they bring back their gifts with them to share with others. So this is the archetype of the hero's journey. And here's a very simplified, ultimately, very simplified version of it. Ordinary life, that's you or me. We're going along, minding our own business. And then all of a sudden, we're asked to do something massive, which we don't feel ready for, like educate for peace in a divided society. And we think, holy heck, can I do this or not? Okay, I'll give it a go. And people start to help us. And we cross over into the realm of engagement thinking, oh, I'm going to go transform the world. All I have to do is talk about values and everything will be fine. And then all of a sudden we start to encounter problems and perils. And I'll invite you to create your own story around this. And we may actually reach a challenge which is so demanding that we almost want to give up. When we persist, we find, I've gained some things along the way. And now it's time for me to return to the world with my gifts, which may be educating future teachers, which may be taking on a new class at the beginning of the school year, which may be bringing some of the learning that we've done in peace education back into our homes and our own family lives where there's dysfunction, and trying to help those heal, which may be moving up the career ladder into positions of influence and trying to shift structures which are against the promotion of peace and reconciliation, et cetera, et cetera. So there's the hero's journey. I invite you to take a piece of paper to draw your journey. Where did you start? How did you get into this crazy thing about peace building and peace education? What have been your highs and lows? What magic and tools and powers have you gained? Who has helped you? And just draw it. And it doesn't have to be complete, and there's no right or wrong about it. And where do you see yourself going? Where are you in that process? Are you in the pit of despair? Are you already emerging out the other side and sharing your gifts with others? Are you in the process of search?